The first thing she felt was the cold. It crawled beneath her skin before her mind caught up, before the world resolved into sense and meaning. The air smelled of iron and wet moss, thin and alien. When she opened her eyes, a bruised sky hung above her, mottled with greenish clouds that pulsed faintly, like something alive. She blinked hard. Her breath came out in small clouds. Her body ached from the inside out. Dr. Elena Ward pushed herself upright. The ground was slick with black mud, shot through with luminous roots that pulsed faintly under her hands. Around her lay shattered glass and twisted metal, fragments of what she realized was a containment pod. She turned, searching for the outlines of her research station, for any familiar landmark, but the jungle that surrounded her was unlike anything on Earth or Mars or any human colony she'd known. Trees stretched upward like pillars of bone, their branches webbed with tendrils that glowed an unhealthy blue. Somewhere in the distance, something screamed, high, sharp, and abruptly silenced. Her fingers brushed her neck, finding the faint scar where her calm implant had been. It was dead. Her heart sank. The last thing she remembered was her lab's power flickering, the alarms blaring, and then the sound of glass shattering as black-armored figures poured through the airlock. They hadn't killed her. They'd taken her. She rose unsteadily, her knees trembling. She still wore her exploration suit, torn at the thigh, her name patch half-hanging. Inside the inner pocket, she found a small field knife and a single emergency nutrient bar. That was all. Someone, or something, had stripped her of everything else. A soft chime echoed through the air, faint but deliberate. Elena froze. It came again, melodic, almost mocking. Then, from above, a shape descended through the mist. A sleek drone, insectal and glinting with dark chrome. Its camera eye focused on her, a red lens whirring. Specimen awakened. A voice crackled through a hidden speaker. It was not human. The tone was guttural, the words distorted, as if the language had been stretched to accommodate alien anatomy. Hunt commences. Elena's pulse spiked. Hunt, she whispered. The drone's lens flared brighter, scanning her body with a cold blue beam. Then it shot upward and vanished among the branches. The forest fell silent. She forced herself to breathe. She had read about species that hunted sentience for sport, rumors dismissed by the Interstellar Council as myth. But standing there, barehanded on an unknown planet with alien eyes watching, she knew the stories were true. The Galactic hunters had taken her. She moved, slowly at first, testing her balance, then faster. The ground was treacherous, littered with skeletal remains, some humanoid, others twisted into impossible shapes. A tattered strip of cloth clung to a branch. It bore markings she didn't recognize. Someone else had been here before her. Someone who hadn't made it out. A sound rustled behind her. She spun, knife raised. Nothing. Just the whisper of the wind through bone-colored leaves. But when she turned again, a figure stood ahead, tall, armored, holding what could only be a weapon. Its body gleamed in the dim light, plates shifting like a beetle's carapace. Its face was a mask of smooth black glass, featureless except for a single slit of green light. Elena's throat constricted. The creature tilted its head, as if curious. Then it spoke, its voice a low resonance that made her skin crawl. Run. Instinct took over. She ran. Branches lashed her face. Roots clawed at her ankles. Behind her came the heavy rhythm of pursuit, steady, confident. She didn't dare look back. A beam of plasma seared the air beside her, slicing through a tree trunk. It toppled with a crash, spraying phosphorescent sap that hissed when it hit the mud. She ducked behind the fallen trunk, forcing her breath into silence. Her chest heaved, her muscles screamed, but she didn't move. The alien's footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. She could hear the faint clicking of mandibles behind the mask. The creature was savoring this. Her mind raced. Think. Analyze. Survive. The terrain sloped slightly downward to her right, where mist pooled thicker. She eased herself that way, inch by inch, until her boot slipped on the mud and she fell forward, sliding down a shallow ravine. Cold water closed over her head. She surfaced, gasping, coughing up metallic-tasting liquid. Above, the hunter peered down, scanning. Its weapon hummed. She pressed herself against the embankment, hidden by roots and shadow. The beam swept across the surface of the water, stopping inches from her face, then moved on. A moment later, the sound of its retreating footsteps faded into the forest. Elena waited until she was sure it was gone. Then she dragged herself onto the bank, shivering, her muscles shaking from cold and fear. The drone's voice echoed again in the distance, counting, announcing, watching. She realized this wasn't a private hunt. They were broadcasting it. She was entertainment. Rage flared beneath the fear, sharp and electric. The thought of alien audiences laughing, placing bets on her death, ignited something inside her that had nothing to do with survival instinct. It was older, deeper, the refusal to be prey. She looked around, studying the terrain with new precision. The forest was alive, dangerous, but predictable. Its patterns could be mapped, its dangers exploited. The creatures hunting her had technology, but she had something else: adaptability. Humans evolved to survive everything the universe threw at them. That was their power. She found a jagged shard of metal among the wreckage of her pod. It was sharp enough to cut through skin. She wrapped it in a strip of her torn sleeve, fashioning a crude spear. Not much, but it was something. Night began to fall, though the planet's dusk was strange, colors shifting between violet and green as bioluminescent vines came alive. Their glow illuminated patches of skulls scattered across the clearing. Some had clean puncture holes through the bone. Trophies, she realized. The hunters collected trophies. A shiver passed through her, but she didn't look away. Instead, she crouched beside the nearest skull and whispered, "You won't be the last story they tell." The words steadied her. She wasn't speaking to the dead. She was making a promise to herself. Somewhere far above, another drone drifted through the trees, its lens fixed on her. Elena stared back, unflinching. She knew now that there was no rescue coming, no negotiation, no mercy. The only way out was through them. She turned away from the camera's gaze, tightening her grip on her makeshift spear. The chill in the air no longer felt like fear, it felt like focus. She was a scientist, and she was trapped inside the experiment. That meant she only needed to understand the rules before she could break them. A low hum rippled through the forest, the signal of the next round beginning. She straightened, every nerve alert. Her reflection flickered in the puddle at her feet, mud-smeared, eyes burning, a ghost of the woman she had been hours ago. She smiled faintly. "If it's a hunt you want," she whispered to the unseen sky, "then let's hunt." The jungle answered with silence, vast and waiting. And somewhere in that silence, the predators began to move. The night passed without rest. Elena crouched beneath the twisted roots of a fallen tree, counting the alien constellations through the gaps in the canopy. The stars were wrong, too bright, too close, and their shimmer reflected on her skin like cold fire. Every sound carried a threat. The clicking of distant creatures, the pulse of machinery, the faint thrum of the drones drifting in orbit overhead. She didn't sleep. She observed. At dawn, the mist thickened into a near-solid wall. The air hummed faintly, as though charged with static. She used that cover to move. Each step sank into the damp earth, her boots leaving ghostly impressions that vanished under the forest's living moss. Somewhere out there, the hunters were watching, recalibrating, waiting for her to panic. But she had studied predators her entire career. Panic was what they counted on. She found a small stream cutting through the jungle and followed it uphill, hoping to locate high ground. The water was laced with bioluminescent particles that flickered around her hands as she drank. The taste was metallic but tolerable. When she cupped her reflection, she barely recognized the face staring back. The sharp lines of fear had hardened into something else: concentration. Survival stripped everything unnecessary away. Near the ridge, she discovered the remnants of another containment pod. It had been there longer than hers. Moss grew thick over the fractured glass. Inside lay a desiccated corpse, humanoid, but not human. Its four-fingered hands still clutched a crude spear. Scattered nearby were metallic fragments, pieces of armor, bits of tech melted by plasma fire. She sifted through them, studying their shapes, noting how they fit together. A power cell, cracked but functional. A shattered optic lens. A strip of flexible wiring. She sat cross-legged in the dirt and began to tinker. The scientist part of her mind reawakened, methodical, detached. The hunters might have advanced technology, but technology obeyed rules, and rules could be broken. Using a shard of her pod's casing, she pried open the power cell and rigged a weak energy pulse through the lens, creating a crude scanner. Its range was pitiful, maybe 100 meters, but when she activated it, the lens flashed once and outlined faint heat signatures in the mist. 3 of them, moving in formation. Elena killed the scanner and pressed herself flat against the ground. The shapes were closing in from the east. She counted her breathing, 4 in, 4 out, and watched their movement patterns through memory alone. They were predictable, confident. She withdrew to the corpse's pod and examined the terrain. The stream curved sharply around a cluster of jagged rocks before disappearing into a sinkhole. The mud there was soft and deep, perfect for trapping heavy feet. She planted her metal shard upright in the center, then used the armor scraps to build a decoy shape, rough, but enough to catch the eye of a thermal scanner. When the first hunter arrived, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Its armor shimmered in the pale light, patterned to match the forest hues. It scanned the area, weapon raised, its movements almost lazy. The second followed close behind, their gestures quick and silent. The third lad carrying a pack slung across one shoulder, supplies, maybe trophies. They approached the trap. The lead hunter stepped into the sinkhole, and the ground gave way with a wet crack. It dropped knee-deep, roaring in alarm. Elena rose from her hiding spot and hurled a rock at the metal shard. The sound rang out like gunfire. The second hunter pivoted instantly toward the noise, firing a plasma bolt that hit the shard dead center. The energy discharged into the mud, igniting the metallic roots beneath it in a brilliant white flare. The explosion threw both hunters backward. The third shouted something guttural, scrambling to retreat. Elena was already moving. She grabbed the fallen pack and sprinted into the undergrowth before the survivors could regroup. Her lungs burned, her legs trembling from exertion. The blast had deafened her right ear, leaving a constant high-pitched ringing. But the adrenaline drowned out pain. When she finally stopped, miles from a ridge, she opened the pack. Inside were ration tablets, a water purifier, and most importantly, a compact plasma sidearm, smaller than the rifles but still deadly. She turned it over in her hands, feeling its weight. The alien grip was awkward, designed for 3 long fingers, but she could manage. Her first weapon. She sat beneath a wide fungus canopy, catching her breath. The air still shimmered faintly with heat from the earlier explosion. The hunters would be furious now. They had wanted entertainment, not casualties. She wondered if the watchers, the unseen audience, were still laughing, or if silence had spread through their channels when one of their champions fell. The thought pleased her more than it should have. As the hours passed, she began to understand the rhythm of the planet. The mist thickened and thinned in regular pulses, synchronized with a low vibration she could feel through the ground. Some natural geothermal cycle. The hunters used it to mask their movements, arriving and vanishing in harmony with the Earth's breath. But that rhythm worked both ways. Patterns could be predicted. By nightfall, she had carved out a small shelter within a hollow tree trunk and rigged her stolen scanner to warn her of approaching movement. The forest noises became background music, the hisses, the clicks, the sigh of unseen wings. She listened to them as she dismantled the ration tablets into measured portions, her thoughts cold and precise. She remembered her students back on Titan Station, her lectures about alien ecosystems. She had spoken of balance, of coexistence, of understanding through observation. It almost made her laugh now. Observation had turned her into prey, but adaptation would make her into something else. Her scanner flickered. One heat signature close, too close. She powered down her light and held her breath. Through a narrow gap in the bark, she saw a hunter kneeling beside the stream, its armor glinting faintly. It wasn't one of the three she'd seen before. This one moved differently, faster, sharper. A tracker, its head turned toward her hiding place. Elena lifted the plasma sidearm and waited. The hunter tilted its head, sensing something. It stepped closer. The moment it crossed the scanner's range, the device let out a faint chime. The alien paused, raising its weapon. She fired. The plasma bolt caught it in the throat. The creature collapsed without a sound. Steam hissed from the wound, glowing faintly in the dark. Elena didn't move for several minutes, listening for others. None came. When she finally approached the body, she saw her own reflection in its mirrored visor. Mud-smeared, eyes hollow, expression unreadable. She pried the visor free, tearing the mask from its face. Beneath, the alien's features were insectoid, with mandibles drawn back in what looked almost like surprise. She studied it without emotion, then whispered, "Now you know how it feels." She dragged the corpse into the stream and watched as the current carried it away, swallowed by the fog. For a long moment, she stood there, gripping the plasma pistol with steady hands. Fear had burned itself out. In its place was something cleaner. Purpose. She turned toward the dark horizon where the hunter's base signals pulsed faintly in the sky. The hunt had changed. Her reflection in the water smiled back at her, sharp and cold. Round one was over. Days blurred into one another. The forest had stopped feeling alien. It had become a map, a system of rhythms. Elena had learned to predict the way a mathematician reads the elegance of numbers. The hunter still searched, but she no longer ran. She listened. She waited. She struck. Each kill taught her more. Their armor was responsive to heat signatures, but slow to adjust to sudden cold. She learned to use the planet's mist as camouflage, cooling her skin with the mineral-heavy water before ambushes. Their vision relied on layered spectrums. Their helmets filtered visible light through pulse intervals. She timed her attacks between those intervals. Knowledge became her weapon. She scavenged constantly. The plasma sidearm from her first kill was now wired into a crude energy cell she'd built from the stolen components. It hummed with dangerous instability, but it worked. She had also fashioned a new tool, a signal jammer that disrupted the drone's tracking patterns. When she activated it, the sky went blind for brief moments, and those moments were hers. The hunters adapted too. Patrols doubled. Traps became crueler, disguised as safe zones where food and water collected unnaturally. Elena dismantled one of their traps and found the remains of a different species, reptilian, thin-boned, torn apart. The sight hardened her further. Mercy had no place here. By now, she had begun to sense their hierarchy. The hunters were not a tribe, but a military order, divided into castes. The smaller ones she had killed were scouts. The larger, slower ones were wardens, tasked with maintaining the perimeter of the hunting grounds. And above them all, the Alpha commanded the hunt. She had seen him only once, through the reflection of a drone's lens. Immense, his armor engraved with faint red sigils that pulsed like veins of magma. That image stayed with her, haunting her dreams. Not with fear, but with inevitability. Their leader would come for her soon. The entertainment of the hunt demanded escalation. She spent the next 2 nights preparing. The planet's forest was laced with biothermal vents, each one releasing bursts of heat at irregular intervals. She studied them through her scanner, charting their locations and timing. Then she began to set traps of her own, plasma cells buried beneath mud. Connected by conductive roots, she had stripped and rewired. The network looked natural, invisible unless scanned precisely. The next morning, the mist carried sound differently. A deep, rhythmic vibration shook the trees, a frequency unlike anything before. She knew what it meant. The Alpha had arrived. Elena climbed to a vantage ridge overlooking a clearing where molten vents cut glowing scars through the earth. From there, she saw him, towering, nearly 3 meters tall, flanked by 2 armored lieutenants. Their weapons were heavier, designed for war, not sport. The drones orbited them in concentric circles, transmitting every movement to unseen viewers. She tightened her grip on the plasma pistol. The faint tremor in her hand wasn't fear, it was anticipation. The Alpha's voice carried through the mist, amplified by his helmet. "Human," it said, the word rough and deliberate. "You are an anomaly." She stayed silent, crouched behind a ridge. "You have killed 7 of mine. That is not permitted." His tone held no anger, only calculation. "Your species is weak. Curious that you are not." Elena allowed herself a grim smile. "Curiosity's what got me here," she murmured. The Alpha raised his head slightly, as if listening. "You have learned much," he continued. "Enough to make this entertaining. But the hunt ends now." The last words vibrated through the clearing. The drones shifted positions, forming a luminous dome of light. She realized he was cutting off her escape, sealing the battlefield. Perfect. She hadn't planned to leave. When the Alpha stepped forward, the earth seemed to bow beneath his weight. His 2 lieutenants spread out, scanning with precision. Elena moved along the ridge, ghosting from shadow to shadow. The mist favored her today. The geothermal vents pulsed bright enough to confuse their sensors. She slid down the slope, keeping low, and reached the first trigger point of her trap. She pressed the activator. The nearest vent exploded upward in a column of molten steam. The lieutenant caught in its path screamed as armor melted. The Alpha turned instantly, barking commands in his native tongue. Plasma fire scorched the air around her. She rolled behind a rock outcrop, her body searing with pain where fragments grazed her side. She returned fire, 2 quick shots. One missed, the other struck the second lieutenant in the chest. It stumbled, roaring, before collapsing beside its burning comrade. The Alpha advanced through the smoke, unhurried, weapon drawn. He was enormous up close, his armor radiating heat like a living forge. Elena retreated toward the second vent, every nerve screaming. She could feel the charge from her buried power cells humming through the ground. One misstep could set them off too early. "Your defiance amuses me," he said. His voice was closer now, low and resonant. "Do you think victory changes what you are?" She fired again. The bolt ricocheted off his armor harmlessly. He laughed, the sound metallic and deep. "You are prey, little one. You kill because you must. We hunt because we can." Elena backed toward the vent, her hands slipping over the final detonator wired beneath a cluster of stones. "Then maybe you should learn the difference." She triggered the charge. The ground convulsed. Energy surged through the conductive roots, igniting every buried cell at once. The explosion tore through the clearing in a wave of white fire. The shock wave threw her backward, slamming her against the rocks. For a moment, all she could hear was static. When her vision cleared, the Alpha still stood, but his armor was cracked, glowing with fissures of molten light. He staggered once, dropping his weapon, then looked at her through a shattered visor. His eyes, dark, compound, burning, met hers. "You," he rasped, voice distorted, "are not prey." He lunged. Elena rolled aside as his gauntlet slammed into the earth where she had stood. She grabbed a fragment of his own broken armor, edges still searing hot, and drove it into the joint of his neck. The Alpha convulsed once, then collapsed forward, his body sinking into the scorched soil. Steam rose around them in ghostly tendrils. She stood slowly, her legs trembling. The mist carried the acrid scent of burnt metal and ozone. Around her, the drones hovered silently, recording every moment. The audience was still watching. She turned toward the nearest one and stared directly into its lens. "In a broadcast," she said softly, then fired. The drone exploded in a burst of sparks. One by one, she shot the rest, each detonation echoing through the dead forest. When silence finally fell, it was absolute. Elena knelt beside the Alpha's corpse and unlatched a small device from his wrist, a beacon still pulsing faintly. She recognized its signal pattern. It connected to the larger network beyond the planet's atmosphere. A way out. She looked up at the bruised sky, where faint streaks of starships orbited far above, and felt something deep inside her settle into clarity. She wasn't done. This was an escape. This was declaration. The forest whispered with dying heat as she activated the beacon. A beam of light shot upward, cutting through the fog like a blade. Somewhere out there, the watchers would see it and know the truth. Their hunt had failed. Elena wiped the blood from her hands and whispered to the sky, "The hunt is over. Now begins the war." The sky burned when the ships came. Elena watched their descent from the ridge, their silver hulls cutting through the green clouds like blades. The beacon's signal had drawn them. More hunters, perhaps reinforcements, or those sent to collect what remained of the spectacle. She stood among the scorched trees, wrapped in salvaged armor that shimmered faintly with heat residue, the plasma pistol resting steady in her hand. Her breath fogged against the cold air, her reflection glinting faintly in the cracked visor of the Alpha's helm, now hanging from her belt. They would come for her soon. But this time, she wasn't the hunted. The first ship landed in the clearing below, displacing the mist into a swirling storm. Drones poured out like locusts, forming a wide perimeter. Behind them, armored figures advanced in disciplined lines, weapons raised. She counted 15, maybe 20. Not a scouting party, a retrieval team. The Galactic hunters were cleaning their stage, erasing the embarrassment she had created. Elena crouched and activated the Alpha's control gauntlet strapped to her wrist. The interface flickered to life, alien symbols shifting rapidly. She had spent hours deciphering them through trial and error, learning enough to manipulate the hunter systems. The network it connected to stretched beyond the planet, satellites, feeds, comm relays. The hunters had built an empire of surveillance. Now it was hers. Through the gauntlet's projection, she saw the broadcast channels still live. Billions of alien viewers were watching, expecting to see their champions restore order. She smiled faintly. Let them watch. The retrieval team spread out, methodical. Their leader barked a command in their harsh tongue. A pair of drones began scanning for residual heat signatures. She watched the readings on her gauntlet. When their sensors swept past her position, she triggered a false feed. The drones pivoted sharply toward the opposite ridge, lights flaring in confusion. Elena used that distraction to move. Her body ached from old burns, but adrenaline masked the pain. She descended through the skeletal trees, silent, calculated. The mist parted around her like a curtain. A soldier passed within arm's reach. She grabbed him from behind, dragging the blade of her plasma knife across the gap in his armor before he could cry out. The body collapsed soundlessly into the mud. She stripped him of his rifle and ammo pack, her movements mechanical. Every decision had purpose. There was no triumph, only momentum. When the next wave of drones swept overhead, she activated the jammer. Their lights dimmed, sensors flickered, and for 30 precious seconds, their world went blind again. She used the time to hack into the nearest ship's landing interface. The access code matched one sheet seen on the Alpha's gauntlet. The ramp began to lower with a hiss. Inside, the air smelled sterile, almost familiar. The ship's control bay glowed with blue hollow screens. She slid into the pilot's seat, fingers dancing across alien symbols. The system resisted her at first, then yielded when she rerouted through the Alpha's command key. She saw the fleet's orbital network light up, a constellation of warships, each linked to a central hub. A single command structure, vulnerable if disrupted from within. The realization struck her with quiet clarity. This was never just a hunt. It was an empire's ritual, a spectacle designed to remind the galaxy who held dominion. But spectacle relied on control, and control could be broken. She accessed the broadcast again. Her image appeared on the screen, a human woman in stolen armor, blood streaking her face, eyes cold and resolute. She looked directly into the camera and spoke, her voice steady. "You've made sport of us long enough." Across the alien networks, the transmission spread. "You hunt the weak to feel powerful. You broadcast death to feel alive. But power isn't control, it's consequence. And you've earned yours." She input the override code she had pieced together from the Alpha's data logs. The ship's system protested, flashing red warnings in 3 languages. She confirmed. The network pulse cascaded upward into orbit. Outside, the sky flared white. The hovering satellites began to detonate one by one, each explosion rippling like thunder through the atmosphere. The retrieval team below froze, turning their faces upward as their communication lines died. Their empire was going dark. Elena stood in the doorway of the ship, watching the chaos unfold. For a moment, she felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. Only silence. Then, slowly, a faint sense of gravity returned, the awareness that she had done something irreversible. The galaxy would remember this moment, and they would remember her name, even if they never spoke it aloud. The soldiers began regrouping, firing wildly into the mist. Plasma bolts struck the ship's hull, sending shudders through the deck. Elena ducked back inside, sealing the ramp. She strapped herself into the pilot's seat and took control manually. The ship's engines roared to life, their vibrations coursing through her bones. The ascent was violent. Flames licked the viewport as she broke through the upper atmosphere, emerging into the vast black. The planet's surface receded below, a wounded, glowing scar among the stars. Around it, wreckage drifted from the destroyed satellites, fragments catching the light like shattered mirrors. Her ship's sensors blinked red. 2 enemy craft had locked on, closing fast. She rerouted power to shields and veered into the debris field. The hull groaned under the stress, but she kept her focus razor-sharp. She had flown worse simulations in training, except this time, the stakes were infinite. The pursuing ships fired. Bolts of blue plasma streaked past her, lighting the void. She dove through the wreckage, weaving between burning fragments of metal. One of the enemy ships clipped an exploding satellite and vanished in a burst of flame. The other kept coming. Elena redirected the ship's energy to the aft thrusters, flipping the vessel in a half-roll. The enemy filled her viewport, its weapons charging. She armed the last of her plasma cells and fired them straight into its intake. The explosion engulfed both ships in a storm of fire and silence. When the light faded, she drifted alone among the wreckage. The ship's systems sputtered, alarms blinking weakly. Oxygen reserves were low. Navigation was gone. But ahead, through the glass, stars stretched like a promise. Uncountable, infinite, alive. She floated there for a long time, her hands trembling over the controls. The adrenaline drained from her body, leaving only exhaustion and the faint hum of life support systems. Somewhere, in the endless dark, there were other worlds, other species who had watched her fight and learned what humans were capable of. Her message had spread farther than she could ever know. Across alien networks, the broadcast replayed again and again. The moment a human refused to die quietly. She opened the ship's internal recorder and spoke softly, almost to herself. "My name is Dr. Elena Ward. I was hunted, studied, and used for spectacle. I am done running." Her gaze lifted toward the stars. "If anyone hears this, remember, we are not prey. We adapt. We endure. We hunt back." The recorder light blinked off. She leaned back in the chair, closing her eyes for a heartbeat. When she opened them again, she wasn't thinking about the hunters anymore. She was thinking about humanity, about what would come next. The ship drifted forward, caught in the slow pull of a nearby moon's gravity. Elena reached for the manual controls, steadying its course. The engines flickered once, then stabilized. She guided the vessel toward the horizon where a distant sun was rising, its light spilling gold across the endless dark. Behind her, the planet burned. Ahead of her, the war waited. She smiled faintly and whispered, "They wanted a hunt. They found extinction." The stars swallowed her ship whole.